The training grounds of Beerus's planet shimmered with residual divine energy. The air itself charged with power that would have obliterated lesser worlds. Goku and Vegeta faced each other across the pristine white expanse, their auras crackling with barely restrained force. Whis stood to the side, his staff planted firmly in the ground, observing with the detached interest of an angel who had witnessed eons of mortal struggle. Goku's black hair whipped in the wind, generated by his own Kai eyes, focused with the kind of intensity that came only after decades of pushing beyond every conceivable limit. His orange Guy was torn and scorched from their earlier exchanges, proof that even gods could bleed when they fought hard enough. Across from him, Vegeta stood with arms crossed, the prince's expression carved, the space between them compressed as both warriors gathered energy simultaneously. Goku's aura flared brilliant azure, the transformation to Super Saiyan Blue, as natural as breathing after all these years. Divine Ki flooded through his body, perfect control honed through countless battles, turning raw power into something approaching art. Vegeta matched him instantly, his own blue aura darker, more aggressive, carrying an edge of controlled fury that defined everything the prince had ever been. They moved. The collision sent shockwaves rippling outward in concentric spheres, distorting reality itself where their fists met. Whis raised one hand, a casual gesture that contained the destructive force before it could crack the planet's surface. The angel's smile never wavered as he watched his students test themselves against each other. Goku twisted mid-strike, his body flowing like water around Vegeta's counter, and drove an elbow toward the prince's ribs. Vegeta blocked with his forearm, the impact creating a thunderclap that echoed across the empty sky. They separated, boots skidding across the white surface, already launching into their next exchange before momentum fully bled away. The energy between them built with each strike, each block, each near miss that would have devastated mountains. Blue fire danced along Goku's arms as he tested a new variation of the Kamehameha, trying to compress the wave into something faster, sharper, more precise. Vegeta saw it coming and responded with a volley of ki blasts that forced Goku to abort the technique and dodge. That was when reality screamed. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. His expression shifted for the first time, his perpetual smile fading into something that might have been concern. The sky above them tore. Not split, not shattered, but tore like fabric, ripping under too much strain. The wound in space bled crimson light, a color that seemed wrong in ways neither Saiyan could articulate. The energy pouring through the breach felt nothing like ki, nothing like divine power, nothing like anything either warrior had encountered across their years of pushing into new realms of strength. Goku powered down, instinctively trying to sense what lay beyond the tear. The wrongness of it made his skin crawl, made every combat-honed instinct scream retreat, even as curiosity pulled him forward. Beside him, Vegeta remained in Super Saiyan Blue, unwilling to show weakness before his voice carried a gravity that neither Saiyan had heard before, stripped of its usual playful lilt. Don't approach it. This energy comes from outside our multiverse entirely. But the tear was growing, expanding with each passing second, like a wound that refused to close. The crimson light intensified, and within it both Saiyans could see shadows moving. Not the shadows of physical objects blocking light, but presences that existed in defiance of natural law. Shapes that hurt to look at directly, geometries that folded in on themselves in ways that three-dimensional minds struggled to process. Goku took a step forward, despite Whis' warning hand extended, as if he could somehow touch the breach and understand what lay beyond. The suction was absolute, grabbing both warriors with force that bypassed physical resistance entirely. Goku felt his ki scatter like leaves in a hurricane as the pull seized something deeper than his body, something fundamental to his existence. He heard Whis shout something saw the angel's staff flare with power bright enough to blind. But the light was already fading as reality twisted around him. Vegeta's hand caught his arm, the prince's grip. Iron hard even as they tumbled through the tear together. The crimson light swallowed them both, and then there was only falling through spaces that existed between dimensions, through colors that had no names, through sensations that mortal minds were never meant to experience. Time became meaningless. They might have fallen for seconds or centuries. His stomach lurched with vertigo that had nothing to do with physical motion. Then came impact. They struck ground hard enough to pulverize stone, their Super Saiyan blue transformations flickering, but holding through sheer force of will. Goku rolled to his feet, immediately dropping into a combat stance as he took in his surroundings. The wrongness he had felt from the other side of the tear was nothing compared to actually being here. The sky above was the color of congealed blood, swirling with storms that crackled with lightning, the shade of diseased flesh. The air tasted of ash and corruption, thick enough to make breathing an active effort. The ground beneath their feet was scorched earth, cracked and broken, dotted with the ruins of structures that might have once been buildings, but had been reduced to twisted metal skeletons. Bodies lay everywhere, human or something close to human, wearing armor that looked like it had been designed to withstand warfare beyond anything Earth had ever known. Their weapons were scattered among the corpses. Strange rifles and blades that still hummed with residual power. But the bodies themselves told the real story. They hadn't just been killed. They had been torn apart, dismembered, mutilated, with a thoroughness that spoke of hatred beyond mere combat necessity. Vegeta straightened beside him, jaw clenched as he surveyed the carnage. The prince's hands were already gathering energy, ready to unleash destruction on whatever had created this nightmare. Movement caught Goku's eye. 100 meters away, figures emerged from behind them came larger figures. Massive warriors encased in armor that looked thick enough to stop tank rounds, carrying weapons that could have been mistaken for small cannons. One of the smaller armored figures raised a hand, and a voice emerged, harsh and mechanical, speaking in a language neither Saiyan had ever heard. The tone made the meaning clear enough. Identify yourselves. Explain your presence. Prove you are not the enemy. Goku raised his hands, palms, out the universal gesture of peace he had learned across a dozen worlds. His blue aura dimmed slightly, trying to appear non-threatening despite the power that still coursed through his body. We're not your enemy. We're lost. The projectile moved fast, faster than most conventional weapons Goku had encountered, but still slow enough for Super Saiyan blue reflexes to track. He tilted his head, letting the round pass harmlessly by his ear. The soldiers ahead opened fire. Las beams stitched through the air in a grid of crimson death, hundreds of shots converging on the two Saiyans from multiple angles. Goku moved without thinking, his body responding to threats with decades of combat experience. He wove between the beams, each movement minimal and precise, never wasting energy on dodges larger than necessary. Vegeta didn't bother dodging. The prince let his aura flare, the divine energy vaporizing any beam that came close to actually touching him. His contempt for weapons that couldn't threaten him was written in these rounds were different, explosive, somehow carrying enough force to actually matter. He grabbed Vegeta's arm and pulled them both aside as the ground where they had stood erupted in a crater of pulverized earth and molten rock. Kakarot, release me. Vegeta's voice carried warning, the prince's pride bristling at being manhandled. Wait! Goku's grip remained firm as he studied the soldiers. Their formation was too precise, their fire too disciplined. These weren't mindless attackers. They were professionals doing their job. They think we're the enemy. We just need to show them we're not. Another volley forced them to move again. Goku pulled Vegeta into a controlled fall, both Saiyans tumbling behind the remains of a collapsed wall. The prince finally yanked his arm free, blue aura crackling with. Goku peeked over the wall, watching the soldiers advance with their weapons still trained on their position. Look at this place. Look at all the bodies. They've been fighting something terrible. We probably look like whatever they've been fighting. Before Vegeta could respond, the ground itself trembled. Both Saiyans felt a massive power approaching from the direction opposite the soldiers. Goku turned his senses, stretching out to identify the incoming presence, and immediately wished he hadn't. The creature that emerged from the ruins stood 3 times the height of a human, its body a twisted fusion of flesh and metal that defied natural biology. Tentacles writhed from its back, each one dozens of smaller creatures humanoid, but wrong their skin the color of rotting meat. Their movements jerky and puppet-like. They carried crude weapons, but moved with single-minded purpose, driven by something beyond normal motivation. The soldiers immediately shifted their fire away from the Saiyans toward the new threat. The mechanical voice that had challenged Goku and Vegeta now barked orders in that harsh language, coordinating defensive positions with military precision. Goku felt his stomach turn as he watched the creatures advance. Whatever they were, they radiated wrongness, the same way the tear in reality had. They shouldn't exist, and yet they did an affront to life itself. The soldier's scream lasted 3 seconds before something unspeakable happened to his body flesh, melting away to leave only corrupted bone. Vegeta moved. The prince's restraint finally shattered at the sight of such casual cruelty. He exploded from cover, blue aura blazing like a star as he closed the distance to the large creature in a single heartbeat. His fist drove into its mass with force that should have pulverized steel, and for a moment the creature's advance stopped. Then it laughed. The sound came from all its mouths at once, a wet, bubbling noise that spoke of diseased lungs and rotted vocal cords. Tentacles wrapped around Vegeta's arms, trying to pull him close to those weeping barbs. The prince's aura flared brighter, burning away his right hand glowed with concentrated ki as he drove it into the creature's center mass, pouring power directly into its core. The explosion that followed scattered pieces of corrupted flesh across a 50-meter radius. The smaller creatures converged on both Saiyans, immediately mindless in their assault, but terrifyingly fast. Goku found himself fighting on pure instinct, each strike destroying bodies that refused to stay down, that kept crawling forward, even with limbs torn away. Vegeta fought beside him, the prince's combat style all sharp edges and controlled fury. Every movement was economical, precise, designed to inflict maximum damage with minimum effort. They fell into the rhythm, last beams stitched through the smaller creatures, and the heavy weapons took apart the larger monstrosities with disciplined fire. The combined assault of Saiyan power and human determination pushed the corrupted horde back meter by bloody meter. When the last creature fell twitching and dissolving into black ichor that seemed to evaporate rather than pool, an eerie silence fell across the battlefield. Goku and Vegeta stood amid the carnage, both breathing hard despite their transformations. The wrongness of this place pressed against their senses like a physical weight. The soldiers approached cautiously, weapons still ready, but no longer actively targeting the Saiyans. The largest of the armored figures stepped forward, and when it removed its helmet, Goku saw a human face beneath. Scarred, weathered, but when he spoke, his voice was rough but controlled. "You fight like no soldiers I have ever seen. What chapter do you serve?" Goku looked at Vegeta, saw his own confusion reflected in the prince's expression. Neither had any idea how to answer that question. Before either could attempt a response, the crimson sky above split apart once more. Not with another tear, but with something worse. A presence descended vast and overwhelming, pressing down on reality itself with weight that made the planet groan. Goku's knees nearly buckled under the psychic pressure, and even Vegeta was forced to brace himself against the onslaught. The soldiers immediately dropped to their knees. The presence touched Goku's mind. And for the first time since arriving in this nightmare world, he felt something other than wrongness. The power was immense, almost incomprehensibly vast. But it carried purpose, order, protection. A desperate, dying hope holding back an ocean of darkness through sheer force of will. Words formed in his consciousness, not spoken, but impressed directly onto his thoughts. The communication bypassed language entirely, conveying meaning in its purest form. You are not of this reality. You come from beyond the walls between worlds. And yet you fight the ruinous powers without hesitation, without corruption. Your souls burning with light, I have not. The warp consumes reality itself, and humanity's light fades with each passing moment. I have held the line for 10,000 years, an eternity of vigilance. But my strength wanes. The chaos gods grow bold, and soon they will break through entirely. Vegeta's voice cut through the mental communication, sharp and demanding. What do you want from us? The presence focused on the prince and Goku felt Vegeta stiffen under the weight of that cosmic regard. When the Emperor spoke again, his words carried the weight of prophecy and desperation in equal measure. Your power is foreign to this realm. Your souls burn with energy the warp cannot touch, cannot corrupt, cannot comprehend. You are warriors who have touched divinity through your own strength, who have faced gods and emerged victorious. I ask nothing. I can only hope that fight to hold back the darkness until the light can be rekindled. The presence began to withdraw, the pressure lifting from their minds. But before it faded completely, one final message impressed itself upon their consciousness. Kadia stands at the edge of annihilation. If you would understand this galaxy's peril, go there. See what forces gather in the darkness. Then decide if you will stand with humanity or merely observe as reality tears itself apart. The connection severed, leaving both Saiyans gasping as their own thoughts returned fully to their control. The soldiers rose slowly still, regarding the two warriors with awe and uncertainty. Goku looked at Vegeta and saw his own. The scorched earth of the battlefield stretched away in all directions, and somewhere beyond the horizon, something called Kadia waited. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together. Two Saiyans against a galaxy drowning in darkness. The sky bled crimson above them, and Goku powered down from Super Saiyan Blue, conserving energy for whatever came next. Beside him, Vegeta did the same, though the prince's jaw remained clenched with barely restrained fury at being trapped in this nightmare realm. Their journey had begun. The transport that carried them to Armageddon was a fortress in its own right, a vessel so massive that its shadow could eclipse entire cities. Goku and Vegeta stood in the observation deck, watching the planet grow larger through reinforced viewports designed to withstand weapons capable of cracking moons. The world below was a monument to humanity's stubborn refusal to die, hive cities rising like metal mountains from ash-covered plains, their surfaces scarred by centuries of warfare. Brother Captain Aethor of the Ultramarines stood beside them, his power armor painted in the cobalt blue that marked his chapter. His face bore the enhanced features of the Astartes, the Emperor's finest warriors genetically sculpted for war. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen worlds burn and stood defiant in their ashes. Armageddon has endured 3 great wars, but this incursion is different. Vegeta's arms remained crossed as he studied the planet below, his expression carved from stone. The prince had been silent for most of the journey, processing the nightmare reality they had fallen into. A galaxy where humans fought and died by the billions, where gods of literal chaos feasted on souls, where hope itself was a rare commodity hoarded like precious metal. Goku could feel the tension radiating from his rival. Vegeta's pride had taken blow after blow since their arrival. Being unable to return home, being dependent on others, to explain this twisted reality, being forced to accept that their power, vast as it was, might not be enough against the forces that threatened to consume this universe entirely. The brother captain continued his ceramite gauntlet, gesturing. The Primarch, who fell to Korn, the blood god, now leads a demonic host numbering in the millions. They have already taken 3 hive cities. Orbital bombardment proves ineffective. The warp protects them, and Angron himself seems to grow stronger with each world he conquers. Goku's fist clenched involuntarily. The name Korn had become familiar over the past days as they traveled toward this war zone. The chaos god of rage, of endless slaughter of blood, spilled for its own sake. Everything Goku had spent his life fighting against concentrated into a single malevolent entity that fed on violence like a parasite. This Angron. Vegeta's voice cut through the observation deck's atmosphere like a blade, but the nails drove him mad implants that turned pain into fury, suffering into strength. When he fell to chaos during the heresy, he became something worse than demon. He became the embodiment of mindless slaughter itself. The prince's eyes narrowed, and Goku recognized the look. Vegeta had found his target, the focus for all the frustration and rage that had been building since they arrived in this nightmare galaxy. A fallen warrior who had surrendered to his own darkness, who had let fury consume everything he might have been. The landing was controlled chaos drop pods screaming through Armageddon's atmosphere like meteors, each one carrying space marines to reinforce positions already buckling under demonic assault. Impact rattled Goku's bones despite his enhanced durability, the pod's retro thrusters firing milliseconds before they struck Earth. The forward hatch blew outward with explosive bolts, and both Saiyans emerged into hell itself. Hive Volcanus burned. Flames the color of fresh blood consumed entire city blocks, heat so intense it turned ferrocrete to glass. But worse than the fire was what danced within it. Demons of Korn, manifestations of pure rage, given blasphemous form, tore through Imperial defenders with casual brutality. Each creature stood twice the height of a man, muscles corded beneath crimson skin horns, curling from skulls designed for nothing but inflicting death. The Space Marines deployed with practice, but for every demon that fell, 3 more seemed to take its place, pouring through tears in reality that bled corruption into the material world. Goku moved without thinking, his body responding to centuries of combat instinct. A demon lunged at a Space Marine whose bolter had jammed claws extended to disembowel. Goku's fist caught it mid-leap, the impact creating a shockwave that scattered ash for 50 meters. The demon's form dissolved, unable to maintain cohesion against the pure ki that flooded through Goku's strike. Vegeta fought with controlled fury, each movement economical and lethal. His energy blasts carved through demonic ranks like scythes through wheat, precise and devastating. But Goku could see the prince's restraint wearing thin with each moment, the effort of holding back when every instinct screamed to unleash his full power. From the burning ruins of the city's central spire, a figure emerged that made the lesser demons seem like children's toys. Angron the Red Angel stood 4 times the height of a man, his body a twisted fusion of demon and Primarch. Wings of brass and sinew spread from his back, each feather a blade dripping with blood that never dried. His face bore the rictus of eternal rage, eyes burning with fires that had consumed his sanity millennia ago. In each massive fist he gripped axes forged in the warp itself, their edges screaming with the voices of every soul they had claimed. The demon Primarch's gaze swept across the battlefield, drinking in the carnage with satisfaction that went beyond mere pleasure. This was his element, his purpose, his existence distilled to its purest form. I smell it on you, warrior. The pride, the barely leashed fury, the hunger for battle that goes deeper than mere survival. Angren's massive form descended crushing rubble beneath brass-shod feet. You could be magnificent in the blood god's service. Cast aside your restraint. Embrace the rage. Let it consume you as it has consumed me, and know the freedom of absolute violence. Vegeta's aura exploded outward blue flames of divine energy that pushed back the heat and ash in a perfect sphere. When the prince spoke, his voice carried the cold fury of a lifetime spent mastering the darkness that Angron had surrendered to. I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. I have faced gods, conquered my own demons, and earned my strength through discipline. His wings spread wide, reality itself cracking at the edges from the warp energy pouring through his form. Lesser demons fled from his rage, instinctively recognizing that their master's wrath had been kindled to heights that threatened even them. Weakness I have fought for 10,000 years, without pause, without rest, without anything but glorious slaughter. I am rage, incarnate fury, given eternal form. You speak of chains while limiting yourself with control, binding your power with pathetic morality. Vegeta's transformation flowed through him like lightning made flesh. Super Saiyan Blue erupted in full force, divine Kai flooding every cell of his body. But this was different from before. The prince refined, his aura darkened, became denser, the blue flames condensing into something approaching liquid light. This was not a new transformation, but mastery of the one he already possessed. Super Saiyan Blue pushed to its technical limits through pure skill. The change took Angron's full attention, the Primarch's demonic senses registering power that had no place in this reality. Energy that the warp could not touch, could not corrupt, could not comprehend. For the first time in millennia, something other than rage flickered across the Red Angel's features. Recognition of a true challenge. Brother Captain Aethor's voice crackled across the Vox, urgent and tactical. All forces fall. His fist drove into the demon Primarch's armored gut with force that created a visible shockwave, the impact crater spreading for hundreds of meters. Angron absorbed the blow, then retaliated with both axes in a cross-strike that would have bisected a tank. Vegeta ducked beneath the attack, his enhanced reflexes reading Angron's movements, despite their supernatural speed. The prince's counterstrike caught the Primarch in the jaw, snapping the massive head back with enough force to shatter mountains. Blood that burned like acid sprayed from split lips, each drop hissing where it struck the ground. The demon Primarch laughed genuine pleasure mixing with his eternal rage. Yes, finally a foe worthy of the blood god's attention. Fight me, warrior, shed my blood, and let me shed yours. Korn cares not from whence the blood flows. Angron's axes carved patterns of destruction through the air, their demonic edges hungry for godly blood. Vegeta wove between the strikes with precision, born of decades fighting opponents who could destroy planets, each dodge minimal and controlled. But Goku could see the toll the battle was taking. Not on Vegeta's body, which remained untouched by the Primarch's attacks, but on his spirit. Each moment fighting Angron, each second exposed to the demon's aura of mindless rage, pulled at something primal in the Saiyan bloodline. The part of them that loved battle, that lived for the thrill of combat, that could so easily tip from discipline into savage joy. Vegeta's attacks grew more aggressive, less controlled. The prince's expression shifted, subtle changes that Goku recognized from their own battles when Vegeta let his Saiyan nature override his warrior's discipline. Angron saw it too, and his laughter redoubled. "You feel it, don't you? The call of battle for its own sake, the hunger to fight, to kill, to glory in strength without purpose or meaning. You are already half-fallen, warrior. One more step and Korn will welcome you into eternal slaughter." The demon Primarch's assault intensified, each strike designed not to kill, but to push Vegeta further toward the edge. The axes created wounds in reality itself, warp energy bleeding through to corrupt and consume. The prince dodged, blocked, countered, but Goku could see his rival's breathing becoming ragged, not from exhaustion, but from the effort of maintaining control against the Primarch's corrupting influence. Not soldiers, not warriors, but ordinary humans who had been caught in the wrong place when the demons descended. A woman still clutched a child to her chest, both reduced to mangled flesh by demonic fury that killed for the sake of killing. Something in Vegeta's expression changed. The growing wildness in his eyes focused, sharpened, became something colder and infinitely more dangerous than rage. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute conviction. "You call this strength, this mindless slaughter of the weak? This is not a warrior's path. This is a beast's rampage, unworthy of someone who was once called a Primarch." The prince's aura compressed further, drawing inward rather than exploding outward. Every erg of wasted energy pulled back, focused, refined into something approaching perfection. Angron charged, both axes raised for a strike that would have cleaved a building in half. Vegeta didn't dodge. He stepped forward inside the Primarch's guard and drove his fist into the demon's center mass. The impact was different from before, no wasted force creating shock waves, no excess energy bleeding off into the environment. Every joule of power channeled directly into the target. The demon Primarch staggered, genuine pain flashing across features designed to know only the pleasure of inflicting suffering. Before Angron could recover, Vegeta was already moving. A kick to the knee that buckled the massive leg. An elbow to the throat that crushed the windpipe momentarily. Strikes that targeted weak points with surgical precision rather than relying on overwhelming force. He had seen Primarchs fight before, had witnessed power that transcended mortal understanding. But this was different. Vegeta fought like a master sculptor, each strike designed to dismantle rather than destroy, to prove superiority through skill rather than brute strength. The prince spoke between strikes, his voice carrying across the battlefield with power that needed no amplification. A true warrior protects those who cannot protect themselves. A true warrior masters his rage rather than being mastered by it. A true warrior fights with purpose, with honor, with something worth defending beyond mere carnage. Angron roared reality itself, cracking from the force of his denial. Warp energy poured through his axes burned with flames that consumed souls, and the air around him writhed with manifestations of pure malice. The crystalline labyrinth materialized around Goku, without warning, reality folding in on itself like origami constructed by a mad god. One moment he stood beside Vegeta in the strategium of an Imperial command ship, reviewing battle plans for the next engagement. The next he was alone in a maze of impossible geometry walls made of fractured light that reflected futures that had never been, and pasts that never were. Goku's hand dropped to his side, searching for Vegeta's energy signature through their familiar connection. Nothing. Not absence, but static, as if something actively jammed his ability to sense ki beyond the immediate space he occupied. His own power remained intact, flowing through his body in familiar currents. But the isolation pressed against his mind like a physical weight. Goku dropped into a combat stance, years of fighting tournaments and universe-ending threats, making caution as natural as breathing. Whatever had brought him here wanted something. And in his experience, beings that manipulated reality itself rarely had benevolent intentions. A figure coalesced from the shifting light humanoid in the loosest sense, its form constantly changing, as if unable to decide on a single shape. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, masculine and feminine, and neither old and young and ageless. Goku, son of Bardock Saiyan, who has touched divinity. Welcome to my domain where all possibilities exist simultaneously, where past and future collapse into eternal. The name came to Goku, unbidden knowledge gifted by the Emperor during their first If Korn represented mindless rage, Tsench embodied its opposite intellect without morality plans, within plans, extending across millennia. Goku straightened from his fighting stance, though his muscles remained coiled and ready. Fighting had solved many problems in his life, but he had learned through hard experience that not every challenge could be overcome with fists alone. Sometimes understanding the opponent's goal mattered more than superior strength. "What do you want with me?" The figure that might have been Tsench laughed, and the crystalline walls echoed the sound in harmonies that hurt to hear. The maze shifted again, and suddenly Goku could see through the transparent surfaces into countless other realities. In one, he saw himself standing over Vegeta's broken body expression. A third showed him as some kind of god emperor, entire civilizations burning at his word. Want such a limiting concept? I offer Goku. I offer you vision beyond the narrow confines of linear time. You stumble through existence moment to moment, never seeing the grand tapestry, the infinite threads of possibility that branch from every choice. But I see all paths simultaneously. I know every future, every past, every might have been. More visions flooded the crystalline surfaces. Goku watched himself achieve Ultra Instinct, watched himself fall to Jiren, watched himself fuse with Vegeta into Vegeto, watched versions of events he remembered, and versions that had never happened, and versions that existed somewhere in the infinite multiverse. The sheer volume of information threatened to overwhelm his mind. Each possibility demanded. His breathing steadied, drawing on meditation techniques Master Roshi had taught him decades ago. The external chaos could not touch him if he did not give it permission to do so. I've met beings who claimed to know everything before. They were usually wrong. The temperature dropped, and when Goku opened his eyes, the playful quality had vanished from Tsench's manifestation. The Chaos God's form solidified slightly, becoming a robed figure whose face remained hidden beneath a hood that contained entire galaxies. You dare mock omniscience, I who have orchestrated the rise and fall of empires, who planted the seeds of the Horus heresy 10,000 years before its flowering, who knows the name of every soul that will be born and die in the next 1,000,000 years. The crystalline maze contracted walls pressing inward with grinding pressure that would have crushed adamantium. But for every wall he repelled, 2 more. Appeared the maze growing more complex rather than simpler. The chaos. God's voice filled the contracting space, no longer playful, but carrying the weight of genuine frustration. You and your companion are anomalies, variables I did not foresee. Your presence disrupts calculations spanning eons. Every future I have planned now branches into chaos possibilities, multiplying beyond even my capacity to track. Do you understand what you have done by merely existing in this reality? Goku pushed harder. His divine Kai, creating a sphere of safety in the crushing maze. But Tsench was right about one thing. The walls kept multiplying. In some he was taller, more muscular, wreathed in darker energy. In others he appeared younger, weaker, less refined. The constant was the expression on his face in each vision. Not the innocent joy of combat he usually carried, but something colder. Calculation. Strategic thinking. The face of someone who fought to win rather than to test himself. Is this your offer? Make me think more like you. Tzench's laughter returned, but bitter now, tinged with something that might have been respect in a being capable of such emotion. You see it already? The fundamental flaw in your nature, Goku. You are pure, uncorrupted by ambition or malice, but also untempered by wisdom or foresight. You fight because you love fighting, not because you understand the consequences of victory or defeat. Cell destroying the Earth because Goku had given him a Senzu bean. Majin Buu annihilating the galaxy because Goku had not killed him immediately. Universe 7 erased because Goku had suggested the Tournament of Power without considering the stakes. Each vision showed a slightly different timeline where his choices led to apocalypse. And in the center of it all, Goku saw a figure that might have been himself, older and scarred eyes carrying the weight of billions of deaths. This version stood alone on a dead Earth, surrounded by the bodies of everyone he had ever known. The expression on that future Goku's face was not grief, but acceptance. The understanding that pure strength without wisdom eventually led only to ruin. You could be magnificent, Goku. I could give you that knowledge, that foresight. You would never again walk blindly into disaster. You would never again let your friends die because you failed to see the danger. The offer was tempting in ways Goku had not expected. How many times had his decisions led to suffering because he had not thought them through? How many times had stronger, smarter people had to clean up the consequences of his impulsive choices? The weight of those failures pressed against him with force greater than the crushing maze. But then Goku remembered Gohan's face when they had trained together in the time chamber. He remembered Krillin's laugh during their childhood training under Master Roshi. He remembered Chi-Chi's exasperation mixed with love. He remembered every moment of pure joy unplanned and but those mistakes taught me things I couldn't have learned any other way. And the people I loved forgave me, helped me get better, stood by me even when I messed up. Goku's aura pulsed once a single wave of power that momentarily stabilized the shifting maze. The blue flames of Super Saiyan Blue condensed, becoming denser, more focused. He had learned this from Whis, from the angel's endless lessons about efficiency and control. You say you know everything, every possible future. But if you already know how everything will turn out, why do you care what happens? Where's the excitement in a story you've already read? The crystalline walls froze, Tzench's manifestation becoming utterly still. You reject omniscience, knowledge itself. What fool turns away from the opportunity to see beyond mortal limitations? Goku smiled, and the expression carried the same innocent joy he had worn when Master Roshi first taught him the Kamehameha. Someone who's learned that the best part of getting stronger isn't knowing you'll win. It's not knowing if you'll win and trying anyway. The maze exploded outward, Tzench's frustration manifesting as reality warping force. Crystalline shards became weapons, each one carrying a different possible future, a different path Goku could take. They converged from all directions simultaneously, billions of choices made manifest as physical assault. Goku did not think about dodging. Thought was too slow, planning too cumbersome. He let his body move on instinct, trusting the reflexes honed through a lifetime. This was what Whis had tried to teach him. Not to become faster or stronger, but to stop thinking entirely. To let the body respond without the delay of conscious decision. Goku had touched this state before, had felt its potential during the Tournament of Power when facing Jiren, but he had never fully grasped. It had always let his excitement override the necessary stillness. Now trapped in a maze of infinite possibility, fighting a god who knew every future Goku finally understood. The only way to defeat omniscience was to become truly unpredictable. Not through random chaos, but through response so immediate, so perfectly in the moment, that even future sight could not anticipate it. His aura changed, the blue flames flickering and fading. For a moment, Goku appeared vulnerable. His hair remained black, but his pupils dilated slightly, becoming deep pools that seemed to perceive without focusing. The transformation was subtle, incomplete, a threshold crossed, but not yet mastered. Ultra Instinct sign. Tsinch's attack struck empty air, the Chaos God's omniscience suddenly blind to movements that existed purely in the present moment. Goku walked through the labyrinth of crystalline blades as if strolling through a garden, his body flowing around each weapon without conscious thought or effort. The Chaos God's roar shook the maze, fury mixing with something that might have been fear. Tsinch threw everything at this impossible Saiyan. Every possible future made manifest as physical force, every timeline where Goku failed or fell or died. But none of them connected because the warrior moving through Goku's fist moved, guided by instinct rather than strategy. It struck the Chaos God's manifestation with force, enhanced not by rage or determination, but by pure technical perfection. The impact sent cracks through the crystalline labyrinth, reality reasserting itself against Tsinch's impossible geometry. You understand nothing. The Chaos God's voice fractured into 1,000 discordant tones. I have planned for eons, orchestrated empires, shaped the destinies of entire species. You are a single warrior, powerful perhaps, but ultimately insignificant against the tide of change itself. Goku's response was simple, delivered with the same smile he had worn when rejecting omniscience. Maybe. But right now, Vegeta stood exactly where he had been mid-sentence in his analysis of Imperial tactical doctrine, apparently unaware that any time had passed. The Chaos God's labyrinth had existed in a pocket of warped time, seconds stretching into subjective hours within its crystalline walls, while the material universe remained unaffected. But Goku knew better. The silver flickers around his eyes still pulsed faintly, taking precious seconds to fade back to his base form. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the temperature-controlled environment. The battle had cost him, had pushed him to maintain the sign state longer than ever before, more stable under combat pressure than his brief flashes during the Tournament of Power. Vegeta noticed the transformation's residue, his expression sharpening with immediate recognition and competitive fire. Kakarot! His body ached in ways that had nothing to do with physical damage, his mind stretched from maintaining that perfect state under combat conditions. Tsinch! He tried to show me every possible future, every way things could go wrong. Said I was too pure, too simple, that I needed to think more strategically. The prince's jaw tightened, understanding the implication immediately. The Chaos Gods were taking direct interest now, no longer content to test them through intermediaries like Angron. And Goku's smile returned genuine and uncomplicated. I told him, knowing the future takes all the fun out of it. Then I hit him. Vegeta stared at his rival for a long moment, expression cycling through disbelief, exasperation, and finally, reluctant respect. Only Goku could reduce a battle against a Chaos God to such child. Did you at least learn anything useful? Goku's expression turned serious, the innocent joy fading into something more contemplative. Yeah. These Chaos Gods, they're powerful, but they're also kind of trapped by what they are. Corn can only be rage. Tsinch can only plan and scheme. They can't change, can't grow, can't become anything except what they already are. The prince processed this, his tactical mind already working through the implications. Whereas we can. We adapt, overcome, push past our limits. Exactly. Goku's fist clenched with determination. That's our advantage. They're stuck being gods. We're just warriors who keep getting stronger. The Strategium's blast doors opened, and Brother Captain Aethor entered, his expression grim beneath his helm. Behind him came an Inquisitor, the woman. We have detected massive warp disturbances in the Nurgle's Garden sector. Entire worlds are succumbing to plague and despair. The Death Guard march, and behind them comes corruption that transforms the living into undead mockeries. Her eyes fixed on both Saiyans. The Imperium requests your aid once more. Goku and Vegeta exchanged a glance, unspoken communication passing between them. They had each faced a Chaos God's champion or influence and emerged victorious, but the pattern was clear. The powers of chaos were escalating, testing these otherworldly warriors with increasing intensity. And somewhere in the Imperium, two more gods watched and waited. Nurgle with his patient rot. Goku had achieved perfect ultra instinct, not through rage or desperation, but through understanding, a simple truth. The future was not set in stone, and the greatest power was not knowing what came next, but having the strength to face it anyway. The silver flickers pulsed once more around Goku's eyes. A promise of a state not yet fully mastered, but growing more stable with each battle. And in the warped Tsinch plotted revenge against the warrior who had proven that some things remained unpredictable even to omniscient eyes. The crusade continued, and with each battle the two Saiyans carved light into the galaxy's eternal darkness. Vegeta rose into the air, his divine aura blazing with light that pushed back the warp's corruption through sheer existence. This was precision given form, discipline made manifest. The prince's voice carried finality. Final flash of honor. The energy wave that erupted from Vegeta's hands was a column of pure azure light, divine ki, refined to its absolute pinnacle. It struck Angron's center mass, and for a moment the demon Primarch's form held against the assault. Then the warp energy sustaining his manifestation began to unravel, unable to maintain cohesion against power that existed outside the very rules governing this reality. Angron's roar became a scream, rage, and denial, mixing with something the Blood God's champion had not felt in millennia. Fear. The final flash seared through him, body and understanding of what he had become, what he had lost, what he could have been, if pride and pain had not driven him to damnation. Then even that fragment was gone, banished back to the warp to reform over centuries, if ever. Vegeta descended slowly, his transformation fading as he conserved the energy that battle had depleted. The prince's breathing remained controlled, his posture perfect despite the magnitude of what he had just accomplished. Around him, the battlefield lay silent, every eye fixed on the warrior who had done what entire Space Marine chapters could not. Brother Captain Aethor approached his steps, heavy with the weight of ceramite armor and religious awe in equal measure. When he spoke, his voice carried reverence that the Ultramarine had previously reserved only for the Emperor himself. You have banished a demon Primarch, Angron the Red. He will reform eventually, as all demons do, but it will take centuries. The Imperium will speak of this battle for millennia. Vegeta's expression remained neutral, though Goku could see the satisfaction in his rival's eyes. Not the savage joy of victory through slaughter, but the quiet pride of a warrior who had proven his philosophy superior to his opponents. The prince had faced the embodiment of rage itself and emerged victorious, not through surrendering to fury, but by mastering it. Goku walked forward, his own respect for Vegeta's achievement clear in his expression. The younger Saiyan had watched the entire battle, had seen his rival pushed to the edge of losing himself to the very darkness he fought against, then pulling back through sheer force of will and conviction. Kakarot, in our universe, we fight to push our limits, to test ourselves against stronger opponents. Here in this nightmare, they fight just to survive. These humans wage war against their own damnation, against gods that want nothing but their eternal torment. Vegeta's jaw tightened. If we're trapped in this reality, we might as well show them what real warriors can accomplish. The Hive City's remaining defenders began to emerge from their positions. Space Marines and Imperial Guard alike, staring at the two Saiyans, with expressions that mixed gratitude with incomprehension. These warriors had spent their lives fighting enemies that could not truly be defeated, only held at bay. The concept of someone actually winning against the forces of chaos, the demons that had poured through reality's tears, were dissolving their connection to the material world, severed with their master's banishment. Hive Volcanus still burned, still bore the scars of demonic assault, but it would survive. Humanity would endure another day. Goku looked up at the blood-red sky, sensing other powers in the distance that dwarfed even Angron. The Emperor had spoken of gods of forces that consumed reality itself. Korn was only one of four, and if the Blood God's champion could push Vegeta to his limits, what would the Chaos Gods themselves be capable of? But for now, they had won a victory. They had proven that warriors from beyond this universe could stand against its darkness and emerge triumphant. And somewhere in the warp entity, but the war for this galaxy's soul had only begun. And two Saiyans had just announced themselves as players in a game that had been played for 10,000 years. Vegeta powered down completely, his energy reserves depleted, but his spirit unbroken. The prince stood amid the ruins, victorious, and for the first time since arriving in this nightmare reality, looked almost satisfied. The darkness would come again. It always did. But when it came, it would find warriors ready to meet it with power that transcended the very rules of this universe. The Death Guard fleet emerged from the warp like a plague, made manifest hulking vessels whose hulls wept toxic sludge that crystallized in the void of space. Goku and Vegeta stood in the observation dome of the Imperial flagship, watching the corrupted armada spread across the system like a disease. The ships themselves seemed alive in ways that violated natural law, their surfaces pulsing with growths that might have been organic or mechanical, or some blasphemous fusion of both. Brother Captain Aethor pointed toward the system's third planet, where the green clouds now obscured what had once been an agri-world feeding billions. His voice carried the resignation of someone who had seen this transformation too many times. Nurgle's garden has taken root. The population... Goku's fist clenched as he watched the infected world rotate slowly beneath its shroud of pestilence. This was different from Korn's rage or Tsinch's schemes. Those at least offered the mercy of ending of conclusions, however violent or twisted. But what he sensed from that dying planet was worse than death. Eternal stagnation consciousness, trapped in rotting flesh, unable to live, but forbidden from truly dying. Vegeta's expression remained hard as ceramite, but Goku could see the disgust flickering in his rival's eyes. The prince had fought countless battles, had killed when necessary without hesitation, but always with the understanding that death was a natural conclusion. They spoke of Father Nurgle's gifts of the peace, found in accepting decay of liberation from the burden of striving against inevitable entropy. Each word dripped with cheerful madness, contentment found in dissolution. Goku had to look away from the view screen, his enhanced senses picking up energies from the planet that made his stomach turn. The Kai signatures were wrong, twisted life force that had been perverted into something that sustained itself through putrefaction. Children laughed in those transmissions, their joy genuine, even as their bodies fell apart piece by piece. The Imperial Navy opened fire lance batteries, carving through the Death Guard fleet with beams of coherent light hot enough to vaporize adamantium. But where the enemy ships broke apart, they did not simply die. Brother Captain Aethor's tactical assessment confirmed what both Saiyans already understood. We cannot bombard the planet. Nurgle's corruption spreads through death itself. Every explosive we drop, every life we end, feeds the garden's growth. We must purge the source, directly find the Plague Lord's avatar, and banish it before the infection spreads beyond this system. Vegeta turned from the viewport, his expression carrying the cold determination of someone who had made a decision and would see it through, regardless of cost. Then we go to the surface. Find this Plague Lord. End this abomination. The drop pods screamed through the planet's atmosphere hull, plating glowing red from friction as it pierced the pod's external sensors registered temperatures and atmospheric compositions that should have been instantly lethal air thick with spores that could corrupt flesh on contact. Impact came with bone-jarring force, the pod burying itself 20 meters into ground that squelched rather than cracked. The forward hatch blew open, and both Saiyans emerged into nightmare made real. The garden stretched to the horizon in every direction, a landscape of impossible biology. Trees grew with trunks of fused corpses, their branches bearing fruit that wept blood and pus. Flowers the size of buildings bloomed with petals of diseased flesh, their pollen clouds spreading infection with every gust of wind. Rivers flowed thick with what had once been the planet's population, now moved with the jerky gait of puppets on broken strings. Their bodies swollen with corruption, skin split to reveal organs that continued functioning, despite being exposed to open air. They sang as they walked hymns of praise, to Nurgle's generosity, voices bubbling through throats, half dissolved by acid. Goku powered up instinctively, his aura flaring blue as Super Saiyan Blue manifested to protect him from the garden's corrupting influence. The divine ki created a sphere of purity around his body, burning away any spores that came close. Beside him, Vegeta did the same, the prince's transformation sharp and controlled. A plague bearer approached what had once been a young woman, her face still recognizable beneath the boils and lesions. He wants to free you from the pain of striving, the agony of hope. Just accept his gifts, and you'll never hurt again. Goku stepped back, revulsion warring with pity. These people were victims corrupted against their will or broken down until they accepted corruption as salvation. But they were also beyond saving their bodies and souls, so thoroughly transformed that no power he possessed could restore what they had been. Vegeta's energy blast vaporized the plague-bearer divine ki, consuming corrupted flesh in an instant. The prince's voice carried no satisfaction, only grim necessity. They're already dead, Kakarot. Whatever remains is just the disease wearing their faces. More plague-bearers emerged from the festering landscape, thousands of them, shambling forward with the Saiyans fought back-to-back their energy blasts, carving through the corrupted horde. But for every enemy that fell, the garden itself seemed to birth two more. Bodies dissolved into the ground, only to rise again, moments later, reformed from the same diseased soil. This was Nurgle's domain, his power absolute within the boundaries of his garden. Goku's ki reserves began to dwindle, the constant output required to both fight and maintain protection from the atmosphere draining him faster than any previous battle. Beside him, Vegeta was no better, the prince's attacks growing slightly less precise as fatigue crept in. Then the ground itself split open, a chasm yawning wide enough to swallow hive cities. From the depths rose a figure that dwarfed even the massive demon engines, a being whose very existence was an affront. His armor was a fusion of ceramite and disease, every surface encrusted with centuries of accumulated filth. In his hands he gripped a scythe whose blade wept toxins capable of killing gods, and his mere presence intensified the garden's corruption 1,000-fold. The demon Primarch's voice was a wet rasp, words bubbling through lungs half dissolved by his own plagues. Warriors from beyond the veil, you fight against inevitability itself. All things decay, all structures crumble, all order dissolves into beautiful entropy. Why struggle against the one truth that governs all existence? Vegeta's response was a volley of energy blasts that would have shattered planets. Mortarion weathered the assault without moving his body, absorbing the divine ki and converting it into more plagues. Every attack, every expenditure of energy becomes sustenance for decay. You cannot win through force. The harder you fight, the faster you succumb. Goku felt the truth of those words in his bones. His own energy blasts had created new pools of corruption where they struck the ground. Vegeta's attacks had scattered plague clouds that now drifted on toxic winds. They were fighting an enemy that grew stronger from resistance that fed on the very act of opposition. The realization hit both Saiyans simultaneously. They could not win this battle separately, could not overcome corruption that fed on conflict itself through conventional means. What they needed was not more power, but different power. A fusion of their strengths that created something. Vegeta hated it, hated the loss of individual identity, hated the dependence on another warrior, however briefly. But the prince's expression hardened with acceptance. Pride mattered less than survival, and survival mattered less than preventing this corruption from spreading beyond this world. They landed simultaneously, powering down their transformations to synchronize their energy levels. The plague bearers surged forward, sensing vulnerability, but Goku and Vegeta ignored them. Their hands moved through the precise steps of the dance movements that looked ridiculous but served a purpose beyond mere aesthetics. Mortarion's scythe swept down to bisect them both before the fusion could complete. Light exploded outward, not blue but white. White tinged with gold, a radiance that was neither Goku's pure ki nor Vegeta's controlled fury, but something that transcended both. The scythe struck a barrier of condensed energy and stopped, unable to penetrate the sphere of power that surrounded the fused warrior. Gogeta opened his eyes, and for the first time since entering Nurgle's garden, the corruption retreated. His aura did not push against the disease, did not fight the garden's influence. It simply existed in a way that made corruption impossible, divine ki refined to such purity that decay could find no purchase. The fused warrior's voice carried both Goku's warmth and Vegeta's steel. Interesting. So this is what happens when we stop fighting separately. Mortarion struck each dodge was minimal, perfect, wasting no energy on unnecessary movement. The demon Primarch's frustration manifested as increased virulence, plague clouds boiling from his armor in waves. But Gogeta walked through them untouched, his mere presence purifying the corruption before it could take hold. This was not resistance, but transcendence power that existed on a level where Nurgle's influence simply could not reach. Gogeta's hands came together, energy gathering between his palms in a sphere of light that seemed to contain entire stars. This was not the destructive power of a final flash, or the overwhelming force of a Kamehameha. This was something new, a technique born from the fusion itself. Where it touched corrupted flesh, the disease burned away. Not violently, but gently, returning the dead to true death and freeing their souls from Nurgle's grasp. Where it touched the festering ground, life stirred not the perverted mockery the plague god had created, but genuine growth, clean and natural. Mortarion roared his form, beginning to dissolve as the purifying wave reached him. The demon Primarch's manifestation could not maintain cohesion against energy that existed in opposition to his very nature. Unlike Angron's violent banishment or Tzeentch's frustrated retreat, Mortarion simply faded his essence, returning to the warp as his physical form was cleansed from reality. The wave continued expanding kilometers, becoming hundreds. The plague-bearers collapsed. Finally granted the death they had been denied, their souls released from corruption's grip. Gogeta stood at the epicenter, his energy reserves depleted, but his purpose fulfilled. The fusion would not last much longer, the tremendous power expenditure of the Stardust Purifier accelerating the time limit. But it had been enough. The world was cleansed, Nurgle's influence banished the dead, finally allowed to rest. The fused warrior's form began to flicker golden light, fragmenting as the fusion reached its limit. Gogeta smiled an expression that carried both Goku's satisfaction and Vegeta's grim pride. Not bad for a first try. Their base forms struggled to maintain consciousness. Bodies pushed beyond their limits by the power they had wielded, however briefly. But around them, the world was healing. Clean air filled lungs that had breathed only poison grass sprouted from soil that had known only corruption. Water ran clear in rivers that had flowed with bile. The garden was broken, Nurgle's manifestation banished, and for the first time in the chaos. God's long existence, his gift of eternal stagnation, had been rejected and overcome. Brother Captain Aethor's strike cruiser descended from orbit, its sensors confirming what seemed impossible. The planet's corruption index had dropped from absolute to negligible in the span of minutes. Entire populations freed from undeath biospheres, restored from terminal blight, a miracle that even the Imperium... He knelt beside them, his enhanced physiology reading their vital signs through his armor's medical sensors. What you have accomplished here defies all tactical doctrine. An entire plague world cleansed. Mortarion himself banished. The Imperium will speak of this for 10,000 years. Goku managed a weak smile, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. We just did what needed doing. Those people deserve to rest, not to suffer forever. Vegeta said nothing, but his eyes remained open, watching the sky above, as it shifted from diseased green back to natural blue. The prince had surrendered his pride, had fused with Kakarot, had become something other than himself, however briefly. And it had worked. The fusion had proven powerful. They could not rely on fusion. As a first resort, could not treat it as anything but a final option when all else failed. As the extraction team carried both Saiyans to the medical bay, Goku's consciousness faded to the sound of clean wind rustling through restored grass. They had won, had proven that even Nurgle's eternal decay could be overcome. But 3 Chaos Gods remained, and the battles ahead would test them in ways that mere strength could not overcome. In the warp, the ruinous powers stirred with concern for the first time in millennia. These warriors from beyond reality were not merely powerful. They were adaptive, capable of achieving states and techniques that Nurgle retreated to the deepest reaches of his plague gardens, contemplating the wound inflicted upon his essence. Khorne raged in his brass throne, denied vengeance against the warrior who had banished Angron. Tzeentch plotted with renewed intensity schemes within schemes designed to contain these anomalous variables. And Slaanesh watched with growing interest, the youngest of the Chaos Gods, sensing in these Saiyans something delicious, Warriors who fought with joy, who pushed themselves to ever greater heights, who found pleasure in combat itself. The Dark Prince smiled, already imagining the exquisite corruption that awaited warriors who loved battle as these did. But for now, in the medical bay of an Imperial cruiser, two warriors slept the sleep of the light within the warp burned brighter. With each battle, and the galaxy's darkness found itself confronting something it had never before encountered. Hope embodied in two warriors who refused to accept that corruption was inevitable, that decay was eternal, that the Chaos God's dominion was absolute. The war for reality itself had entered a new phase, and 3 standard weeks passed before Goku and Vegeta recovered enough to leave the medical bay. Their bodies had healed within days, enhanced Saiyan physiology repairing damage that would have killed baseline humans. But the spiritual exhaustion from wielding Gogeta's power required longer recuperation, their ki reserves depleted to depths neither warrior had experienced, even after the Tournament of Power. Brother Captain Aethor briefed them in the Strategium hololithic displays showing the Imperium's current crisis points. The map was a sea of red, thousands of worlds burning under assault from Chaos Xenos and worse. But one sector glowed with a different color, purple so deep it appeared almost black. The Eye of Terror expands. Slaanesh's influence spreads beyond its usual boundaries. Warriors abandon their posts to pursue sensation artists, create works that drive viewers to madness. Nobles indulge in excesses that would make the most depraved pre-fall Eldar seem restrained. Vegeta's expression hardened as he studied the tactical displays. The prince had spent their recovery analyzing their battles against the Chaos God's forces, identifying patterns and weaknesses. What he had discovered troubled him in ways he had not voiced even to Kakarot. The other 3 gods attacked us directly or through champions. Why does Slaanesh wait? The Ultramarine's jaw tightened. Hesitation flickering across his enhanced features before duty overcame reluctance to speak the Dark Prince's nature aloud. Because Slaanesh is but the youngest god understands that true corruption comes not from forcing change, but from magnifying what already exists within the soul. Goku felt a chill run through him, despite the Strategium's controlled temperature. He thought back to their fusion, to the moments when Gogeta had existed as a being separate from either component. The joy of combat multiplied the satisfaction of victory, amplified the sheer pleasure of wielding power, that transcended individual limits. It had felt right in ways that set off alarm bells in the part of his mind which had trained to recognize danger. The Vox crackled with an incoming transmission signal strength, impossibly strong for something originating from deep within the Eye of Terror. When the voice spoke, it carried tones that shifted between. I have watched you dance across my siblings' domains with such delicious intensity. Each battle a performance, each victory a masterpiece. But you fight with such restraint, holding back the true depths of what you could know, what you could become. I would show you pleasure beyond mere combat sensation that transcends physical limitation. Vegeta's hand moved toward the Vox controls to sever the connection, but the transmission continued regardless of physical switches. Slaanesh's influence operated on levels deeper than electromagnetic waves. Come to me, fused warrior. Come and experience what it means to truly let go of all restraint, to surrender to the perfection of absolute excess. I promise you battles that never end, opponents who push you to... Goku exchanged a glance with Vegeta, seeing his own concern reflected in the prince's eyes. The other Chaos Gods had attacked them through force or manipulation. Slaanesh offered something far more insidious. Not corruption through suffering, but through satisfaction, through giving them exactly what their Saiyan nature craved most. Brother Captain Aethor's voice carried warning tempered with respect for warriors who had already proven themselves against impossible odds. The Dark Prince's domain is unlike the others. Those who enter seeking to destroy corruption often find themselves transformed into its greatest champions. Slaanesh does not break warriors. The god perfects them into exactly what they already wish to become, then shows them how that perfection itself becomes damnation. Vegeta's response was immediate, sharp, but Goku shook his head, instinct warning against that approach, even though he could not articulate why. The Chaos God had invited them, had specifically called to their fused form. Refusing to fuse might keep them safe from whatever Slaanesh planned, but it would also mean leaving the corruption unchallenged, allowing the Dark Prince's influence to spread, while they avoided confrontation out of fear. No. We go in fused. Whatever Slaanesh wants to show us, we face it together. The descent into the Eye of Terror felt different from their previous deployments. Where Nurgle's realm had been physically corrupting and Sanch's domain had twisted reality's rules, Slaanesh's territory attacked Mud through beauty itself. The flagship's viewports showed nebulas of such exquisite color that looking at them too, Goku and Vegeta stood in the drop pod, already transformed into Super Saiyan Blue, their divine ki providing some insulation against the realm's influence. They performed the fusion dance without discussion movements, synchronized through practice and necessity. Gogeta materialized in a flash of golden light, the fused warrior's consciousness settling into familiar patterns. But immediately, he felt the difference. The satisfaction of successful fusion, normally a brief acknowledgement, stretched and intensified. The power flowing through his body felt better than it should, more pleasurable, each movement sending ripples of sensation that demanded attention. The pod landed on a world that should not exist, its surface a canvas of living art. Mountains sculpted from materials that shifted between. Even the air tasted of perfection, each breath carrying flavors that evolved to match the inhaler's preferences. And everywhere the servants of Slaanesh performed. Warriors danced with weapons that extended their bodies into living sculpture. Artists created paintings with their own blood that showed viewers their deepest desires. Musicians played instruments carved from sentient crystal that screamed in harmonies beyond mortal comprehension. Gogeta walked through this gallery of excess, his aura blazing to protect against direct corruption. But protection against force was not protection against temptation. Every step felt more satisfying than the last. Every breath brought pleasure that intensified with each inhalation. His own power, the demon's voice carried tones that bypassed conscious thought to speak directly to desire. Welcome, perfect warrior. You who exist as fusion of discipline and instinct, control and freedom. Do you not feel how right this realm is for you? Here battle need never end. Here strength brings only greater satisfaction. Here you can fight forever, growing stronger with each victory, pleasure compounding until it becomes your entire existence. Gogeta's fist moved before the conscious thought, striking the demon with force that scattered its form into mist. But the attack itself felt too good, the impact sending satisfaction through his arm that spread to encompass his entire body. He wanted to hit something else to feel that sensation again, amplified. More demons appeared, each one crafted to provide the perfect challenge. He fought them, his body moving through forms that combined Goku's instinctive artistry with Vegeta's calculated precision. But with each victory, the satisfaction intensified. The joy of combat, natural to both Saiyans, magnified beyond healthy limits. Gogeta found himself prolonging fights not to test techniques, but to extend the pleasure. He began using more force than necessary, creating larger explosions, not for tactical advantage, but because they felt better. Slaanesh's voice whispered through the realm, honeyed and poisonous. You see, this is what you truly want. Not to protect others, not to grow stronger for noble purpose, but simply to fight because fighting feels good. Every battle you have ever waged carried this truth at its core. The thrill. Gogeta's next attack shattered a mountain the demon he targeted already defeated. But the fused warrior continuing to pour energy into destruction for the sake of destruction itself. His breathing came faster, not from exhaustion, but from excitement that bordered on addiction. The part of him that was Goku wanted to stop, to pull back, to remember why they fought. The part that was Vegeta wanted to prove dominance, to show Slaanesh that they could not be corrupted. But Gogeta himself, the fusion that was neither, and both felt the pull of battle lust, threatening to consume his purpose entirely. The realm shifted, and suddenly Gogeta fought not demons, but reflections of himself. Each one represented a possible future versions of Gogeta who had surrendered to combat for its own sake. Some bore the marks of all of them wore expressions of satisfaction that had rotted into addiction. Gogeta struck at these visions with increasing desperation, but each blow fed the cycle. Fighting felt good, and feeling good drove him to fight more, and fighting more intensified the pleasure until nothing else mattered. His attacks grew wilder, more excessive energy expenditure skyrocketing as he chased satisfaction that slipped away even as it intensified. Then, through the haze of battle lust, Gogeta heard a voice that came from within his own consciousness. Goku's voice, small but clear. "This isn't why we fused. We didn't become Gogeta to fight forever. We did it to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." And Vegeta's voice, sharp with controlled fury. "We are warriors." The fusion's body flickered, stability wavering, as the components reasserted individual identity while still technically fused. It should have been impossible maintaining fusion while acknowledging separation. But desperation transcended normal limitations. Gogeta's hands moved to his own chest, one glowing with Goku's bright blue ki, the other with Vegeta's darker azure energy. He drove both fists into his own center, not to harm, but to force acknowledgement of what he had become. The fusion that had been created to overcome corruption was itself corrupted. Battle lust, magnified beyond safe limits by Slaanesh's influence. The impact created a shockwave of pure willpower, Gogeta forcibly ejecting the Dark Prince's influence from his consciousness. The pleasure that had wrapped around every sensation, the fusion's time limit, already accelerated by the constant combat and energy expenditure, crashed towards zero. Gogeta had perhaps seconds remaining before diffusion became inevitable. He gathered energy one final time, not for destruction, but for rejection. His aura compressed into a sphere of light that contained all the battle joy Slaanesh had amplified, all the excessive pleasure the Chaos God had offered, all the corruption that had nearly claimed him. I fight because it challenges me to grow, because testing myself makes me better, because protecting others gives battle meaning beyond simple satisfaction. Gogeta's hands thrust forward, releasing the sphere not as an attack, but art created from suffering music played on instruments of tortured flesh dance, performed by souls trapped in eternal performance. The Dark Prince's scream echoed across dimensions, fury mixing with something that might have been respect. Slaanesh had offered Gogeta perfection of his nature, and the fused warrior had chosen to remain imperfect, to retain the ability to grow, rather than crystallize into flawless stagnation. The fusion shattered golden light, fragmenting into two separate forms. Goku and Vegeta collapsed to their knees, the diffusion hitting them harder than any previous separation. They had not simply ended the fusion, but forcibly ejected corruption, while still merged an act that strained both body and spirit beyond normal limits. But around them, Slanesh's realm recoiled. These warriors had rejected perfection, had chosen restraint over excess, had proven that even the most seductive corruption could be overcome through recognition of what truly mattered. Goku struggled to his feet, offering a hand to Vegeta. The prince took it without his usual reluctance, both warriors understanding that they had just survived something potentially more dangerous than any physical battle. Slanesh had not attacked their bodies or minds, but their very nature as Saiyans, the fundamental drive that made them seek combat. And they had won by admitting vulnerability, by separating their consciousness within fusion to recognize corruption, by choosing meaning over pleasure. The extraction beacon activated Brother Captain Aether's voice, carrying relief. Vegeta's response was quiet, stripped of his usual arrogance by exhaustion and hard-won wisdom. We learned that power without purpose is just another form of corruption. That even the right desires magnified beyond reason become chains. Goku nodded, his own voice carrying unusual gravity. And that the best part of fighting isn't the fighting itself. It's what the fighting protects, what it means, who we become by choosing to fight for something beyond ourselves. As the extraction shuttle descended, both warriors understood that they had passed through 4 trials, faced 4 aspects of chaos, and emerged changed. Korn had tested Vegeta's discipline against rage. Tsinch had tested Goku's purity against omniscience. Nurgle had tested their unity. The Emperor waited. Terra called, and the final confrontation with chaos itself approached. In the warp, the 4 ruinous powers gathered their strength, plotting in concert for the first time in millennia. These warriors from beyond reality had proven resistant to individual corruption. But together unified in chaos, undivided, the gods would test whether any mortal will could stand against the full might of the Imperium. Goku and Vegeta boarded the shuttle, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits tempered by trial. They had learned their limits, found their purpose, and proven that even the Golden Throne Room stretched beyond normal spatial dimensions, a cathedral that existed simultaneously in real space and the warp. Goku and Vegeta stood before the Emperor of mankind, or what remained of him, after 10,000 years of eternal vigil. The physical body had long since withered to little more than a skeleton, held together by psychic will and the arcane machinery that sustained his consciousness. But the presence radiating from that ruined form could still shake worlds. Brother Captain Aethor knelt with the other Ultramarines who had escorted the Saiyans to Terra, heads bowed in reverence before the master of mankind. Inquisitors and tech priests lined the chamber's periphery, their augmented senses recording every moment of this unprecedented audience. The Emperor's voice filled their minds, without passing through ears communication that transcended language, to convey meaning in its purest form. You have done what I have not accomplished in 10,000 years of unceasing struggle. Each of the ruinous powers retreats from your presence, their champions banished, their influence diminished. And yet, I sense that you do not comprehend the true magnitude of what approaches. Goku felt the weight of that cosmic awareness, pressing against his consciousness, trying to show him the full scope of the threat, without crushing his mortal mind beneath information it was never designed to process. He saw the warp as the Emperor, perceived it not as separate realm, but as reflection of all consciousness. Every emotion in the galaxy, but even Vegeta's arrogance could not deny the truth in the Emperor's words. They had fought individual manifestations, defeated separate champions, but the unified threat of chaos itself remained beyond their current comprehension. The psychic communication continued, and this time it carried urgency that made the Golden Throne's machinery groan with sympathetic resonance. The 4 gods gather their strength, Khorne, Tsench, Nurgle, and Slaanesh set aside their eternal conflicts to unite against you. Chaos. Undivided, the combined might of the Imperium, focused to a single purpose. They will manifest in real space itself, tearing the veil between dimensions to confront you directly. No mortal. Then what do? We can't just let them destroy everything. The Emperor's presence pulsed with something that might have been satisfaction, or perhaps bitter amusement at the innocence of someone who still believed every problem had a solution. Your power is foreign to this reality. Your ki burns with energy the warp cannot corrupt because it exists outside the rules governing this universe. When you fuse, when you become Gogeta, that purity magnifies. But even that may not be enough against all four gods working in concert. The Golden Throne's machinery began to fluctuate, warning klaxons sounding as the Emperor's consciousness drew deeper on reserves already depleted by millennia of constant strain. Tech priests rushed forward to adjust. I have held this vigil for 10,000 years. My body rotting while my mind fights an endless war in the warp. I have denied the Chaos Gods their complete victory through nothing but stubborn refusal to die. But my strength finally wanes. The Astronomicon flickers. The barriers I maintain grow thin. Within the year, perhaps less, my vigil will end, and Terra itself will fall to chaos. Vegeta's eyes narrowed, tactical mind already processing the implications. You're dying. And when you die, the warp consumes everything. The confirmation came with resignation, born of 10 millennia contemplating inevitable defeat. Unless the gods themselves are broken before that moment arrives. How did you kill gods who existed as the fundamental emotions of every living being in the galaxy? How did you destroy rage itself, or ambition, or despair, or excess? The Chaos Gods were not beings in the conventional sense, but manifestations of consciousness across trillions of souls. The Emperor's presence intensified, and suddenly both Saiyans found themselves pulled into a vision that transcended normal perception. They stood within the warp itself, seeing the sea of souls as the Emperor had navigated it for millennia. The four Chaos Gods loomed like mountains of pure emotion, their forms vast enough to dwarf galaxies, their influence spreading through every crack in reality. But there, at the center of that impossible tableau, Goku and Vegeta saw something that did not belong. Their own ki, magnified through fusion, blazing with purity that the Chaos Gods could neither comprehend nor corrupt. The vision ended, leaving both Saiyans gasping as their consciousness returned to the Golden Throne Room. But they understood now what the Emperor proposed, not to fight the Chaos Gods in real space, where they could manifest only partially, but to confront them directly in the warp itself, in the heart of their power, where they were strongest, but also most vulnerable to something that existed completely outside their nature. The Emperor's next words carried the weight of a choice that would determine the galaxy's fate. I can give you the final gift my failing body still possesses. The ki, you wield this energy from beyond our universe, not the rotting corpse bound to this throne, but the Emperor, as I was, before the heresy whole and unburdened. Goku exchanged a glance with Vegeta, unspoken communication passing between them. They both understood the implication. The Emperor asked for their power for the very energy that kept them alive and fighting. And in this reality where their ki reserves depleted so much faster than in their home universe, giving away that power might mean leaving themselves vulnerable at the moment of greatest need. But they also understood the opportunity. The Emperor, at full strength combined with Gogeta's unique nature, might create the opening necessary to wound the Chaos Gods in ways they had never been wounded before. Vegeta spoke first, his voice stripped of arrogance by the gravity of the moment. Enough that failure will mean your deaths and the galaxy's damnation. Goku's response came without hesitation, the same simple faith that had carried him through every battle. Then we'll just have to make sure we don't fail. Both Saiyans powered up simultaneously, their auras blazing blue, as Super Saiyan Blue manifested in full. The divine ki flooded the golden throne room, washing over the assembled Imperials with energy that felt fundamentally different from the Emperor's psychic might. Where the master of mankind's power carried the weight of 10,000 years of grim determination, the Saiyan's ki burned with joy in combat, with the thrill of pushing beyond limits, with innocent pleasure in testing strength against impossible odds. The Emperor's consciousness reached out not to take, but to accept what was offered. Goku, the transfer was not violent or draining, but it was profound. They felt pieces of their power leaving, taking with it reserves they would not be able to fully replenish before the final battle. The Golden Throne's machinery screamed as it tried to process energy it had never been designed to channel. Tech priests shouted warnings about cascade failures, about systems pushed beyond theoretical limits. But the Emperor's will held the ancient mechanisms together through sheer force of consciousness, using the ki to accomplish what no technology could. Golden radiance condensed above the throne, not flesh reborn, but a Psyker avatar woven from his will and the Saiyan's ki. The form that took shape was the Emperor, as he had been before the heresy. The avatar's appearance sent shockwaves through the assembled Imperial's custodians, dropping to their knees at the sight of their master. Manifested beyond the throne for the first time in 10 millennia. The avatar towered over even the Astartes, his form radiating power that made reality itself bend in acknowledgement. But this was not the cold psychic might that had held back chaos through endless vigil. This was something warmer, more immediate, the Emperor's consciousness given temporary form through fusion of his will with the Saiyan's ki. The Avatar's voice carried warmth the throne had long forgotten, yet every syllable frayed the light that bound it. I had forgotten what it felt like to perceive the material world directly, without the filter of the throne's machinery. Your gift has granted me this projection would not last, could not last. Even with ki reinforcement, the Emperor's consciousness could only sustain manifestation outside the throne, for hours at most. The master of mankind seemed to read Goku's concern through the psychic connection that still bound them. This avatar will hold for hours if I conserve its strength, minutes if I must exert full power. But hours are enough to do what I have been unable to accomplish in 10,000 years. Hours are enough to enter the warp directly and hold the gateway open while you face the Chaos Gods in their own domain. Vegeta's tactical assessment cut through the moment's gravity. We'll need to fuse. Gogeta and the Emperor together, going into the heart of chaos itself. The Emperor nodded his newly. The Chaos Gods are already manifesting, drawing their power together for the assault they believe will finally break my vigil. But they do not expect us to attack first to bring the battle into the warp itself. That surprise may be the only advantage we possess. Goku felt his ki reserves settling at new lower levels. The energy they had given to the Emperor would not return, and what remained would have to suffice for the fusion and whatever battle awaited in the Imperium. He should have felt weakened, diminished, but instead, he felt focused. Every battle had led to this moment. Every victory against chaos had been preparation for the final confrontation. The Avatar walked to the throne room's center. The custodians who guarded the throne room stood in shock, unable to process the sight of their master, manifested beyond the golden throne after 10,000 years of immobile vigil. Before the Emperor could speak further, an inquisitor stepped forward from the assembled officials, her augmetic eye glowing with cold certainty. In her hand, she held a data slate bearing the seal of Exterminatus, the Imperium's ultimate sanction. Her voice carried the absolute conviction of someone who believed themselves the instrument of the Emperor's will. My lord, 12 worlds have been touched by the alien light these warriors carry. Their populations show signs of spiritual contamination, exposure to energies not sanctioned by the Ministorum. The Exterminatus writs are prepared ready for your seal. When the Emperor spoke, his voice carried weight that made the Golden Throne's machinery groan in sympathetic resonance. Not today, Inquisitor. Hold your zeal until you can tell light from corruption. These warriors fight with purity your writs cannot comprehend. The worlds they touched are healing, not dying. Your Exterminatus will wait. The data slate lowered resentment smoldering behind the Inquisitor's obedience. She bowed stiffly, retreating to the chamber's edge, but Goku could see the suspicion in her augmetic eye. The Imperium's reflex toward purging anything unknown ran deeper than even the Emperor's direct command could fully override. The Avatar continued as if the interruption had been expected, inevitable given the Imperium's nature. The Astronomicon will guide us to the point where the warp is thin. I will provide the psychic might to hold the gateway open. Together we will prove that even gods can bleed. Brother Captain Aethor found his voice awe and duty warring in his expression. My Lord Emperor, what would you have us do? The Ultramarines stand ready to follow you into the warp itself if that is your command. The Emperor's refusal was gentle, but absolute. No, my son. What comes next is beyond even the Astartes' capability. You will remain here, hold Terra, and if we fail, by humanity whatever time remains with your lives. His golden eyes swept across the assembled Imperial forces. But have faith. These warriors from beyond our universe have already accomplished what I thought impossible. Perhaps they can work one more miracle. When they became Gogeta, every erg of power would matter, every second of fusion time would count. The Avatar extended his hand, and the two Saiyans clasped it in turn. The contact was not solid flesh, but condensed psychic energy, warm, despite its ephemeral nature. The touch allowed direct communication, showing them the path they would take into the warp, the enemies they would face, the stakes if they failed. Rest now. Restore what strength you can. When the Chaos Gods manifest for their assault, we strike first. This Avatar will hold long enough to anchor the gateway. Gogeta will provide the purity to withstand chaos itself. As Goku and Vegeta were escorted to chambers prepared for them both, warriors felt the weight of what approached. 4 Chaos Gods united, but they had faced impossible odds before. They had pushed beyond every limit, achieved transformations that transcended mortal capability, overcome corruption that had claimed countless worlds. And they would do it again one final time, because the alternative was watching an entire galaxy drown in darkness. In the warp, the Chaos Gods gathered their might, confident that these upstart warriors would finally face power beyond their capacity to resist. But Horn's rage, Tzench's schemes, Nurgle's despair, and Slanesh's excess all failed to account for one simple fact. Saiyans did not know how to surrender. And when pushed to the edge of defeat, they found ways to grow stronger. The final battle approached, and 2 warriors from beyond. The barrier between real space and the warp had never been thinner. Goku and Vegeta stood at the point where the Emperor's avatar had guided them, a location that existed simultaneously in Terra's upper atmosphere and the edge of the Imperium. The air itself fractured here, reality splitting into geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly, spaces where the material universe ended and the Sea of Souls began. The Emperor's avatar hovered beside them, golden radiance already flickering as the strain of maintaining manifestation outside the Golden Throne took its toll. Tech priests, monitoring from orbit, reported catastrophic destabilization in the warp's current psychic storms, building to intensities that threatened to tear through every thin point in the galaxy simultaneously. The Chaos Gods were four presences so vast they dwarfed galaxies' emotions given form. And will the collective consciousness of every dark impulse across trillions of souls condensed into singular entities? Khorne's rage burned like a star of pure violence. Tzeentch's schemes twisted probability itself into knots. Nurgle's despair spread like gravitational collapse. Slaaneish's excess distorted perception until pleasure and pain became indistinguishable. And they were uniting, setting aside their eternal conflicts to manifest together as chaos undivided. Vegeta's jaw tightened as he surveyed the fragmenting barrier. Tactical mind already calculating angles of approach and retreat, despite knowing that conventional strategy meant nothing against foes who existed outside normal causality. The prince's pride had been tempered. This is it. No holding back, no testing their strength first. We fuse immediately and hit them with everything we have. Goku nodded his usual enthusiasm for battle tempered by understanding of the stakes. This was not a tournament where defeat meant trying again. This was not even a fight where death was the worst outcome. If they failed here, if Chaos Undivided broke through and consumed Terra, every soul in the galaxy would spend eternity feeding the gods they had fought so hard to resist. The Emperor's avatar spoke his voice, carrying across dimensions to reach not just the Saiyans, but every psychically attuned being in the Sol system. I will hold the gateway open. My will shall anchor the passage between dimensions, creating a space where you can fight. Both Saiyans transformed simultaneously, Super Saiyan Blue blazing into existence as they synchronized their power levels for fusion. The divine ki pushed back against the warp's influence, creating spheres of stable reality around their bodies. Then, without hesitation, they began the dance. The fusion dance had always looked ridiculous movements that seemed more suited to comedy than combat. But as Goku and Vegeta's fingers touched and their energies merged, reality itself bent to acknowledge what they had created. Light exploded outward, not blue this time, but white shot through with gold radiance that existed on wavelengths the material universe had never produced. Gogeta opened his eyes as the warp tore fully open. The barrier shattered like glass, and through the breach poured chaos undivided. Was rage given infinite cunning despair, weaponized through ambition, excess refined into perfect decay. It was everything wrong with consciousness, distilled to singular purpose. The entity that emerged stood taller than mountains, its form shifting between the aspects of its component gods. Brass armor flowed into rotting flesh, which crystallized into impossible geometries before dissolving into clouds of sensation. 8 eyes burned with colors that should not exist, and when Chaos Undivided spoke, the voice was 4 tones overlaid until they became a harmony that threatened to shatter sanity itself. You who exist outside our rules, you who burn with energy the warp cannot claim. We have come together, set aside 10 million years of conflict because you threaten the natural order. All consciousness feeds us. All emotion strengthens our dominion. The Emperor's avatar expanded golden light, weaving a cage of psychic force around the breach. His consciousness strained against pressure that would have crushed lesser minds to nothing, holding the gateway stable through sheer force of will, accumulated across 10,000 years of eternal vigil. Now Gogeta, while I hold the path. The fused warrior moved. Gogeta crossed the distance to chaos undivided in a single instant. His speed transcending normal physics to operate on principles the warp itself struggled to comprehend. His fist drove into the unified God's center mass with force that would have shattered planet's divine key, flooding through the point of impact to scour corruption from the inside out. But chaos undivided was not. The God's form absorbed the impact flesh that was not truly flesh, rippling to distribute force across infinite dimensions. Then it struck back with all four aspects simultaneously. Khorne's rage manifested as weapons that existed in eight dimensions at once, blades that cut through space and time and possibility itself. Gogeta wove between them, his body moving with combat instinct, refined through centuries of fighting impossible opponents. But even Ultra Instinct had limits against attacks that existed in configurations mortal minds could not fully perceive. A blade found its mark, carving through Gogeta's shoulder in a line of pure agony. The wound did not simply cut flesh, but attempted to inject Khorne's essence directly into the fused warrior's being. But the effort cost him key reserves already diminished by the energy given to create the Emperor's avatar, now depleting faster than any previous fusion. He could feel the time limit approaching minutes rather than the half-hour the Metamorph fusion should have provided. Tzeentch's aspect seized control of Chaos Undivided's voice schemes layered within schemes pouring out in honeyed tones. You cannot win this battle, Fusion. We are eternal, reformed from consciousness itself. Even if you banish us, we will return when next someone feels rage or ambition or despair or desire. But you are temporary. Your fusion burns through its limit. Your Emperor's avatar frays with each second. Accept the inevitable and we promise you quick dissolution rather than... But Gogeta was more than Vegeta's logic, was more than Goku's instinct. He was both and neither, and he had learned through their battles against each individual god that sometimes the only winning move was to reject the game entirely. You're right that you'll reform, but you're wrong about one thing. We're not trying to kill you. We're trying to hurt you so badly that you remember what it feels like to be afraid. Gogeta's hands came together, energy gathering between his palms in a sphere that compressed tighter and tighter. This was not a technique from either Goku or Vegeta's arsenal, but something born from the fusion itself, power that drew on everything they had learned across their battles in the Master of Mankind, had held the Astronomicon burning for 10,000 years, had maintained barriers against the warp through endless centuries of torment. But this was different. This was active combat rather than passive resistance, and even his legendary will had limits. Cracks spread through the Avatar's light, and through those fractures, the warp began to bleed. Not the controlled gateway the Emperor maintained, but raw chaos unreality pouring into real space to corrupt and consume. Terra's orbital defenses opened fire on demonic manifestations that appeared in the void lance batteries, carving through horrors that should not exist. Gogeta saw the Emperor failing, saw the Avatar beginning to dissolve. The fused warp divine key flooded into the psychic avatar. Pure energy from beyond the warp's rules reinforcing will. With substance it could not corrupt, the Emperor's manifestation stabilized cracks, sealing, as Gogeta's power merged with his ancient consciousness. For a moment, the two warriors existed in perfect synchronization. Saiyan Ki and human psychic might operating as unified force. And in that moment, they understood what needed to be done. The Emperor's voice resonated through Gogeta's mind, no longer separate communication, but shared thought. We cannot defeat them separately. Your purity alone is not enough, and my will alone has only ever held them at bay. But together merged as you merge Goku and Vegeta's natures, we not physical merger, but spiritual unity. the Avatar's psychic essence interweaving with the fused Saiyan's ki to create something that had never existed in this universe. The risk was absolute. If the merger failed, both would be destroyed. If chaos undivided struck during the vulnerable moment of fusion, the galaxy would fall. But if they succeeded, if this impossible combination of three warriors could achieve stability even for seconds, they might create power capable of truly threatening the gods. Gogeta accepted the Emperor's offer without hesitation. The Avatar dissolved golden light streaming into the fused warrior's body as 10,000 years of accumulated will merged with ki that existed outside the warp's ability to corrupt. Gogeta's form blazed with radiance that combined azure divine energy with the Emperor's psychic gold. Gogeta felt his consciousness expanding, touching the minds of every human in the Soul System, feeling their hopes and fears and desperate faith in the Emperor who had protected them for so long. But where the Chaos gods fed on emotion to sustain themselves, this connection demanded nothing. It simply was pure awareness without consumption. When Gogeta opened his eyes, they blazed with light that existed in colors the warp had never produced. His aura compressed into a shell so dense it distorted space around him, gravity itself bending in acknowledgement of power that transcended normal physics. This was not Super Saiyan Blue evolved, not any transformation from his home universe. This was Limit Ultra Fusion. Chaos undivided, recoiled all four aspects. The unified God struck with everything it possessed, all four aspects pouring their full might into assault, designed to annihilate Gogeta before this impossible state could be weaponized. The warp itself convulsed reality, fragmenting as Chaos Undivided tore through dimensions to multiply its attack vectors beyond counting. Gogeta moved through the assault like light through vacuum, his body responding to threats before they fully manifested. The Emperor's consciousness guided him through psychic attacks that would have shattered minds, while his own ki burned away corruption that sought to infect his essence. Each step took him closer to Chaos Undivided's core, the point where all four gods' essences merged. Then Gogeta was inside the unified God's guard, his hand pressing against the point where rage and ambition and despair and everyone you've tortured, every soul you've claimed across 10,000 years. Energy erupted from the point of contact, not as explosion, but as wave of absolute rejection. Gogeta's ki refined through the Emperor's will, and amplified by Limit Ultra Fusion, flooded into Chaos Undivided's core like antibodies attacking infection. The divine energy did not destroy, could not destroy beings made of fundamental emotion. But it could hurt them, could scar their essences in ways that would take eons to heal. Chaos Undivided screamed the sound tearing across dimensions as four gods experienced agony beyond their capacity to process. Their unified form shattered the aspects separating as maintaining cohesion became impossible under the assault. Horn fled back into the deep warp, his rage diminished. Nurgle's despair turned inward, the plague god retreating to his gardens, to nurse wounds that would not heal through acceptance alone. Slayanesh withdrew into excess itself, seeking pleasure intense enough to overwhelm the memory of pain. The warp convulsed as the chaos gods retreated their influence, receding from the breach like tide pulling back from shore. The gateway that Gogeta and the Emperor had held open began to collapse reality, reasserting itself now that the unified assault had been broken. But the cost had been absolute. Gogeta felt the Limit Ultra Fusion state shattering the merger of three warriors never meant to exist for more than moments. The Emperor's consciousness separated, first his psychic essence pulled back toward the Golden Throne by mechanisms that had sustained him for 10. The Metamoran fusion followed Gogeta's unified consciousness, fragmenting back into Goku and Vegeta's separate identities. The diffusion hit them harder than any previous separation, the aftermath of limit ultra fusion, leaving both Saiyans utterly depleted. They fell. Terra's gravity seized them as they dropped from the point where the breach had been two warriors plummeting toward the surface from orbital heights. Their bodies burned from atmospheric re-entry, ki reserves too exhausted to maintain protective auras. Consciousness faded as oxygen deprivation and G-forces overwhelmed even Saiyan physiology. Then golden light caught them. The Emperor's avatar manifested one final time, using the last fragments of power Gogeta had given him to cushion their fall. They struck Terra's surface in the Imperial Palace's outer courtyards. Impact cratering the ancient stone, but survivable thanks to the avatar's final intervention. Custodians rushed forward their enhanced physiology, allowing them to weather the psychic shockwave that had driven baseline humans to their knees across the planet. The Emperor's avatar faded completely, the last vestiges of manifestation dissolving as his consciousness returned fully to the Golden Throne. But before the projection vanished entirely, both Saiyans heard his voice one final time, quiet and exhausted, and carrying satisfaction earned through ultimate victory. Sleep now, warriors. You have done what I could not accomplish in 10,000 years. Around them, alarms fell silent as sensors confirmed the warp breach had sealed. The psychic storms that had threatened to consume the galaxy subsided. Chaos's unified assault broken by warriors who had proven that even gods could be wounded. Tech priests and apothecaries descended on the crash site, their instruments detecting vital signs, barely registering as alive. But both Saiyans breathed hearts beating with the stubborn rhythm of warriors who had faced oblivion and refused to surrender. Across Terra, across the Imperium, across human consciousness, bound through the Astronomicon, a single truth resonated. The Chaos Gods had been defied. The eternal darkness had been pushed back. And it had been accomplished not by the Emperor alone, not by his space. In the warp, the Chaos Gods retreated to the deepest reaches of their domains, nursing wounds that burned with energy they could not comprehend or consume. They would return eventually. Such was their nature. But the memory of this defeat would shape their strategies for millennia. The understanding that mortals could achieve power capable of genuinely threatening the eternal. And on Terra, in the Imperial Palace's medical sanctum, two Saiyans slept the sleep of those who had given everything and survived by the narrowest margin. Their bodies would heal, their power would return, and when they woke, they would face the question of what came next. But for now, they had won. 3 weeks passed before Goku opened his eyes. The recovery chamber was unlike any medical facility he had experienced, more cathedral than hospital vaulted ceilings, disappearing into shadows, while servo skulls drifted overhead, monitoring vital signs through instruments that blended technology and prayer in equal measure. His body ached in ways that transcended physical damage muscles, remembering the strain of limit ultra fusion, even as Saiyan physiology worked to repair what should have been irreparable harm. Vegeta lay in the adjacent chamber, still unconscious, the prince's vital signs steady, but his ki depleted to levels that registered barely above baseline human. They had given everything in that final battle, pushed beyond every limit. An apothecary noticed Goku's awakening, the Space Marine's enhanced senses detecting the subtle shift in breathing patterns that indicated consciousness returning. He approached with the careful respect of someone who had watched the impossible made real. His power armor's white paint marked with the red cross of the Hospitallers. You live. Against all projections, all medical doctrine, you survive what should have killed you 1,000 times over. Goku tried to sit up, but his body refused the command. Weakness was foreign to him, the inability to move through simple exhaustion Rather than injury, a sensation he had not experienced since childhood training under Master Roshi. He settled for turning his head, looking through the reinforced viewport that showed Terra's sky, and stopped breathing. Where no star should be, it pulsed with steady rhythm, and even through the viewport's filtering, even with his ki sense nearly depleted, Goku could feel it. His own energy, or something born from it, anchored in real space, where it should not exist. The apothecary followed his gaze, something approaching reverence entering his voice. The Saiyan Star. It appeared 3 days after your battle with Chaos Undivided, manifesting in Terra's upper atmosphere. The tech priests cannot explain it through conventional physics. The astropaths claim it resonates with frequencies the warp has never produced. The ecclesiarchy debates whether to declare it holy or heretical. Goku watched the star pulse, each beat synchronized with his own heartbeat, despite the impossible distance. Somehow the energy from limit ultra-fusion had not dissipated. If they could return. The thought had been buried beneath the immediate necessity of survival, the desperate battle against chaos, leaving no room for consideration of home. But now, lying broken in an Imperial medical bay, Goku confronted the possibility that the tear which had brought them here might never reopen. That Universe 7, his friends and family, the life he had built across decades of adventure and combat, might be forever beyond reach. The apothecary seemed to sense the shift in his patient's emotional state, the monitoring equipment registering elevated stress despite physical stillness. The Emperor wishes to speak with you when you are recovered. He has remained conscious since the battle's conclusion. His vigil on the Golden Throne resumed, but his burden lessened. The Chaos God's retreat has stabilized the warp across. It will not last forever, but it buys us time measured in centuries rather than years. Footsteps approached ceramite boots heavy on stone floor. Brother Captain Aethor entered the medical sanctum, his armor bearing fresh battle damage from conflicts Goku had slept through. The Ultramarine's expression carried the controlled grief of someone who had lost brothers, but could not yet afford to properly mourn. The galaxy continues its wars. Without Chaos's direct intervention, the Xenos' threats intensify. The Tyranids push deeper into Imperial space. The Necrons awaken on a dozen worlds. The Orcs gather for a Wag that threatens the Eastern Fringe. But these are enemies we understand, threats we know how to fight. His eyes met Goku's. You gave us that. The certainty that but he recognized the look in Aethor's eyes. The Space Marine needed to believe in the victory, needed the certainty that their efforts had meaning beyond temporary reprieve. Who was Goku to take that away by dwelling on how close they had come to absolute defeat? The next week brought Vegeta's awakening, the prince emerging from unconsciousness with characteristic fury at his own weakness. His first words were a demand for status report, tactical assessment of threats, while they had been incapacitated. Goku watched his rival process the information with the same analytical precision that had made Vegeta such a formidable warrior, but saw something different beneath the prince's usual. When they could finally stand without assistance, when their ki had recovered enough to maintain Super Saiyan transformations for brief periods. The Emperor summoned them once more to the Golden Throne. The master of mankind remained bound to his life-sustaining machinery body, withered and broken, but his psychic presence carried new strength. The wounds Chaos Undivided had inflicted on him during their 10,000-year war had finally begun healing. Corruption scoured away by the energy Gogeta had channeled through him. The Emperor's voice filled their minds with communication that transcended language. You seek to return home. I have felt your longing across our psychic connection, the pull toward the universe you were torn from. The tear that brought you here has long since closed. Hope flared in Goku's chest, almost painful in its intensity. Home. Chi-Chi and Gohan and Goten. Training with Whis, competing in tournaments, the simple joy of testing himself against worthy opponents without the galaxy's survival hanging on every battle's outcome. But the Emperor's next words carried warning. The energy required would be immense, and the targeting imprecise. You might emerge in your own universe years before or after you left. You might find yourselves in a timeline adjacent to your own, similar, but not identical. The warp cares nothing for mortal convenience, and breaching dimensional barriers carries risks I cannot fully calculate. Vegeta spoke aloud, his voice rough from disuse, but carrying absolute certainty. The Emperor's presence pulsed with understanding that came from watching civilizations rise and fall across millennia. Then gather your strength. When the Saiyan star reaches its apex, when the energy you left anchored in real space peaks in its resonance, I will open the way. But know this, warriors from beyond the veil. What you have done here will echo across eternity. The Imperium will remember the day chaos itself was wounded. And perhaps in ages yet to come, when darkness seems absolute and hope has died, some desperate soul will look to the stars and remember that even gods can bleed. The day of their departure arrived. Around them, an honor guard of space marines from a dozen chapters bore witness warriors who would carry tales of this moment to battlefields across the galaxy. Brother Captain Aethor stepped forward, extending his hand in the manner of warriors acknowledging equals. The Codex Astartes will be amended to include your battles. Every space marine will know how two outsiders achieved what the Imperium alone could not. Safe journey wherever the warp takes you. Goku clasped the offered hand, feeling the enhanced strength in the Ultramarine's grip, moderated by respect that transcended species barriers. Keep fighting. Keep protecting people who can't protect themselves. That's what makes you warriors, instead of just soldiers. The warp tore open not the bleeding wound chaos had created, but a controlled aperture reality peeling back to reveal the sea of souls beneath. But this breach was different from before. The Emperor's will had woven barriers through its psychic shields that would protect the Saiyans from the warp's corruption during their passage between universes. And through those barriers, the energy of the Saiyan star poured blue-gold light, creating a path through madness toward home. Goku and Vegeta exchanged one final glance, unspoken communication passing between them. Whatever awaited in their own universe, whatever time had passed or changes had occurred, they would face it together. Then, without further hesitation, they felt themselves moving through spaces between realities, through the gaps where one universe ended and another began. Then, with a sensation like surfacing from deep water, they broke through into familiar cosmic architecture. The stars were right, the fundamental forces operating on principles their bodies recognized. Universe 7 home, exactly where they belonged. The breach sealed behind them with finality that spoke of bridges burned and paths closed. Terra disappeared the entire Warhammer universe, becoming memory rather than present reality. But even as Goku and Vegeta oriented themselves, even as they sensed Whis' energy signature approaching with the angel's characteristic speed, they both felt it. The echo of the Saiyan star still pulsing in a universe they would never visit again. That warriors could achieve power capable of wounding gods. That light could exist within the warp itself. Whis arrived with his usual serene expression, staff planted in the void, as if standing on solid ground. Ah, there you are. I was beginning to wonder if that dimensional breach had caused complications. You've been gone for approximately 8 seconds. Goku and Vegeta stared at the angel, processing the implications. 3 months of battle, of facing chaos gods, and nearly dying a dozen times over, of achieving transformations that transcended their previous limits. All of it compressed into 8 seconds of Universe 7's timeline. Whis' eyes twinkled with the amusement of someone who understood far more than he revealed. Though I must say you both seem to have experienced quite the adventure. Perhaps you'll tell me about it over dinner. Goku's laugh came unbidden relief and exhaustion and simple joy at being home mixing into sound that had been absent too long from his voice. Yeah, we've got one heck of a story. As they followed Whis back toward Beerus's planet, back toward training and tournaments, and the life they had built across decades of pushing beyond limits, neither Saiyan looked back. The Warhammer universe would continue without them, the Imperium carrying forward the hope they had helped rekindle. But in the warp in the space between dimensions, the Saiyan star burned eternal. And across a galaxy drowning in darkness, humans looked up at that blue-gold light and remembered a simple truth. The gods could bleed. Chaos could be wounded. And in both universes, across dimensional barriers that should have been absolute, the echoes of that final battle would resonate for eternity. 2 Saiyans had stood against ultimate darkness and emerged victorious, leaving behind a legacy that would outlast empires and reshape how an entire civilization understood the nature of hope itself. The story ended where it began, with Goku and Vegeta training under an angel's watchful eye. But they were changed, tempered by battles that transcended their previous understanding of what warfare could mean. And sometimes, during rare moments of quiet reflection, they both looked toward the distant stars and wondered if somewhere beyond the dimensional walls, that blue-gold beacon still burned. And humanity, stumbling through its grim crusade against endless darkness, held fast to the truth those 2 warriors had proven. Light could exist within the warp itself.